Mona Weissmark from the USA waited years for this occasion, for her first meeting. In the war, a German family saved her father's life. And now they're here in Chicago. In those days, Renate Sebers was a young woman. Stefan Sebers, her brother, just a child.
It's a very important moment in my life.
Have you been very nervous by waiting?
I've been very impatient. Yes.
The visit in Chicago of Renate and Stefan Sebers confronts Mona Weissmark with a painful past. The past both families share began here in Harz. In the last years of the war, the Nazis built a concentration camp in Langenstein-Zwieberge. It belonged to Buchenwald. 3,000 named markers are a reminder of the prisoners' death march in April 1945, at the end of the war. Every piece of paper represents a prisoner who was murdered here. One of the concentration camp inmates was the father of Mona, Adolf Weissmark, a Jew from Gleiwitz in Schlesien. A photo with his fiancée just before his deportation. The experience Mona's parents faced during the Holocaust moved her deeply. It hurt her. For many years, the professor of psychology researched how the Holocaust affected the lives of post-war generations, how traumatic experiences were subconsciously passed on, how the sadness and anger of parents affected their children. She wrote a book about it, called Justice Matters, dedicated to the memory of her late parents. A picture of Mona's mother. When a girl, she was in Auschwitz. Imprisoned in different concentration camps, Mona's father experienced a personal odyssey. After the war, he emigrated to the USA, as his wife did. Germany was a terrible experience.
I hated them. I held all the Germans accountable. I hated everything to do with Germany and Germans. At the same time, I couldn't really understand how people could do that. But when I would ask my parents, and I talk about that in the book, for an explanation of why this was done, because I would ask them, you know, as a child, Mommy, Dad, why would they do that? They would always just say the Germans were anti-Semitic. So I assumed that all Germans were, for some unknown reason, and it was like a child would imagine a monster.
America, spring 1961. The live broadcast trial of Adolf Eichmann is heard in America. He is mainly responsible for the organized transportation of Jews to concentration camps. A court case that moved the world. Mona, a 7-year-old child, was told by her mother for the first time about Adolf Eichmann and Nazi atrocities.
I remember her crying as she was watching it, and so I was very curious because it was very, very unusual to see her crying in the middle of the afternoon. And so I asked her questions, and she explained to me that, don't remember exactly the words, but I definitely got the idea that it was connected to why her parents and brother and our family were killed. My entire identity was formed by that fact. It's not to say, obviously, there are other aspects of me that are important, but not only because I didn't have a family, but my parents had numbers on their arms, so there was a constant reminder of something that made them very different and very unusual.
In the summer of 1944, the Nazis started in Langensteiner Thekenbergen the construction of a secret tunnel system, which was to give protection from Allied bombing attacks. The intention was to manufacture airplanes and other armaments underground. 8,000 concentration camp prisoners dug in 9 months, 10 miles of mountain tunnels. Hell in Zwieberge, worse than Auschwitz and Buchenwald, is how survivors describe this place. The prisoners' average life expectancy was 4 to 6 weeks. Verschrottung durch Arbeit, worked to scrap, was what the camp commandants called it. April 1945, pictures of the American army liberating the camp. Only a few prisoners managed to survive the so-called death march. Those who did suffered severe malnutrition, most of them physically decimated and at death's door. Mona's father was supposed to be on the death march, but as the camp at the end of the war descended into chaos, security got laxer. Mona's father hid with a fellow prisoner among mattresses. Then they smuggled themselves at great risk to their lives out of the camp. Weighing just 35 kilos, just skin and bone, sick with typhus and full of cuts, they made it with the last ounce of strength to the next village of Börnecke. In this house lived Pastor Sebers and his family. During Nazi rule, it was forbidden to help prisoners. To do so put one's life in danger. The Sebers family did not turn them away. The youngest son, Stefan, was a mere child, the oldest daughter, Renate, 22 years of age. 60 years later, they journeyed to Mona Weissmark in Chicago. Mona was 15 years old when her father told her for the first time about the Sebers family, how both prisoners took shelter with the Sebers family, how they were cared for and hidden from the Nazis. They were there for months. For the family Sebers, it was all about loving your fellow man. Renate, who after the war entered a convent, remembers. When we approached the door, we saw 2 physical wrecks. We didn't know if they were men or women, but we saw that they were from the concentration camp as they wore striped clothing. I think that one of them said he wanted to eat something warm. And then I phoned my mother, and then the 3 of us helped them physically to our spare room. Pastor Sebers was a member of the German Confessional Church, an opposition movement who were against the Nazis.
Da gab es also überhaupt keine Überlegung, das geschah mit einer Selbstverständlichkeit.
It never even crossed our minds. It just happened. My parents and my father believed in what they said, so they knew what to do. They did what they thought to be right, from the bottom of their hearts, from their compassion for mankind. Although it was a terrible time, and food was hard to come by.
Furchtbar schwere Zeit war und mit der Ernährung sehr, sehr schwierig war.
The eldest daughter, Ricarda, spent much time caring for the prisoners. Later, she fell ill with typhus and died. For his entire life, Mona's father believed that he infected Ricarda and was responsible for her death. If that really happened, will never be known. It took a long time for Mona to accept the help her father got in Börnecke. She finally got to realize that the Sebers family also suffered.